In the final days of World War II, Berlin was no longer a city, it was a battlefield. Bombs fell day and night. Buildings burned, hope disappeared, and in the middle of it all was a 22-year-old nurse named Anna. She didn't carry a weapon. She carried bandages. And every morning she woke up shocked she was still alive. This is the story of her survival in the ruins of a fallen city. By April 1945, Berlin was surrounded. The war was lost, everyone knew it, even if no one dared say it out loud. For Anna, the city's collapse wasn't a distant headline. It was the reality she lived every single day. The hospitals, once symbols of healing, were now overflowing with the wounded and dying. Electricity was a luxury that failed daily, plunging their work into darkness. Clean water was gone, forcing nurses to carry buckets by hand from wherever they could find a source, often under the threat of shelling. Anna had trained to save lives, not to watch them fade away in a makeshift hospital basement, because the upper floors had been bombed to rubble. The air was thick with the smell of dust and despair. There were no clean sheets. There was no anesthesia to ease the suffering. Medicines were so scarce they were practically gold. But the people kept coming. Wounded soldiers, terrified civilians, anyone caught in the crossfire. They arrived with hope in their eyes, and all Anna could offer was her hands and her will to keep going. Every day blurred into the next, a relentless cycle of trauma and exhaustion. Soldiers arrived with shattered limbs, their youthful faces aged by the horrors they'd seen. Civilians were pulled from beneath collapsed buildings, covered in dust and blood. And the children cried for parents who would never return. Their small, lost faces were the hardest to bear. Anna did what she could. She cleaned wounds with boiled water, a painstaking process to prevent infection. She washed and reused the bandages until they were little more than threads. When medicine ran out, she whispered words of comfort, holding a hand, offering a shred of humanity in the chaos. She wrote later in her diary, "You didn't ask who someone was or what side they were on. You only asked if they were still breathing. That was the only question that mattered." Outside, the thunder of artillery was a constant, deafening roar, a soundtrack to the city's demise. But inside the basement hospital, a different sound was feared even more. Silence. Silence meant another person had lost their fight. It meant another life had slipped away, and there was nothing anyone could do but move on to the next. At night, the fear grew heavier. The entire hospital would shake with each new explosion, rattling the makeshift beds and the nerves of everyone inside. Patients screamed in their sleep, reliving the horrors that brought them there. The staff, including Anna, slept in short, fitful shifts on the cold floors, in crowded stairwells, anywhere they could find a moment of relative safety from the bombs. Sometimes in those brief moments of sleep, Anna would dream of quiet streets and sunny days, of a life before the war. But she would always wake to the screaming of sirens or the cries of the wounded, reality crashing back in. Food had all but run out. Her meals became a thin, watery soup made from whatever scraps they could find, often boiled with melted snow. Hunger was a constant ache, but she kept working. She had to. Because stopping meant thinking. It meant letting the fear in, letting the full weight of their situation crush her. And if she stopped, who would be there for the next person brought in? Work was its own form of survival. In the last week of April, the fighting reached their doorstep. The distant thunder of artillery was replaced by the sharp crack of gunfire echoing through the hospital hallways. The war was no longer outside. It was inside. Some nurses, overcome with terror, fled into the chaos of the streets. But Anna stayed. She couldn't abandon her patients. With the help of the few remaining staff, she moved the most vulnerable, hiding them in deeper cellars as soldiers fought their way through the surrounding blocks. The world she knew collapsed in a matter of days. Buildings that had stood for centuries were now burning skeletons. Flags fell. Orders stopped coming. The war for her was no longer about nations or ideologies. It was about getting through the next hour, about protecting the handful of lives left in her care. It was about pure, primal survival. Then one morning, she woke up not to the sound of explosions, but to an unnerving silence. No bombs, no guns, no sirens. The war was over. The fighting had stopped. But peace didn't arrive like a celebration. It crept in like a ghost. The city was a shattered skeletal ruin. Bodies lay unburied in the streets. Dazed survivors wandered through the rubble, searching for loved ones, calling out names that would never be answered. Anna walked through the ruins of her own city, A landscape so twisted and broken that she could barely recognize the streets she grew up on. The silence was heavier than the bombs had ever been. In the weeks and months that followed, life began to stir again amidst the destruction. Hospitals slowly reopened, and Anna continued her work as a nurse. There was no glory in it, no victory parades for the survivors. There was just a profound, unending need. People were still sick, still injured, still grieving. Her work wasn't for a nation anymore. It was for the people who were left. Years later, when she was an old woman, she wrote about her experience. "Survival is not heroic," she said. "It is quiet. It is painful. And it stays with you forever." She never forgot the faces of those she couldn't save. Their memory was a weight she carried for the rest of her life. But she also remembered those who lived, the ones who made it through. Their survival was a small, flickering light in the immense darkness. History often remembers the generals, the battles, and the grand strategies. But wars are truly survived by ordinary people, the nurses, the mothers, the children, who endure the unimaginable and find the strength to keep going. Anna's story is not about the glory of war. It's about the quiet courage of endurance. It's a reminder of the human cost of conflict and of the people who lived through the darkness, so that we might learn from it and ensure it never returns. Thank you for watching. Remember the people and learn from the past.